If you're trying to get a lean, toned, sexy looking body, but you're feeling incredibly overwhelmed around all the different nutrition and diet information out there, don't worry, baby girl. I've been there in the past, but I've got you. In today's video, I'm gonna break down everything you need to know about what to eat, how much to eat, what do meals actually look like, and also how to make it really quick and easy so that you're feeling full, you're feeling satisfied, but you're also looking really good and you have a balanced, realistic lifestyle. So you can both have the fit, toned, sexy body you want to have while getting to enjoy your life. So let's get into today's video going over what to eat to achieve those results. What's going on, Fit Fam? Welcome on back to my channel. My name is Megan Janice. I'm an online nutrition and fitness coach for women, and I teach you ladies how to eat more food without any restrictions and work out smarter instead of harder so you can build that banging, sexy, feminine hourglass body that you look and feel amazing in and maintain it year-round for life with ease. So if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Come follow me over on Instagram for even more fitness content. And if you're coming on back, thanks so much for joining for another video. Okay, fam. So what do you actually eat? How do you eat in order to lose body fat and build muscle? Because that is all that it is to get a lean, toned, great looking body. It's simply keeping your body fat levels relatively low, adding more muscle onto your body. That's going to give you the shape and definition that you want. Now, obviously, you also need to be training. You also need to be lifting weights, ideally, to especially be building the muscle and speeding up your metabolism. But of course, you need to eat the right way to support that. And when it comes to fat loss, yes, your workouts contribute to your fat loss, especially just in the sense that the more muscle you build, the faster your metabolism is, and that's keeping fat off your body. But fat loss is going to mainly come from your nutrition. It's really how much you eat and what you eat that is going to determine how lean you get, and then also, showing that sexy muscle underneath. Now, this is where a lot of people go wrong, is because they think they just need to eat very little, or that it needs to be really boring, it needs to be really restrictive. And obviously the problem with that is, number one, you really are not going to get a fast metabolism and you're not going to build a bunch of muscle that way. But number two, it's really not sustainable, so then you don't end up actually being consistent with it, and then you run into all kinds of problems. So my personal favorite way to approach your nutrition is tracking macros. So it's the same really as tracking calories, except the difference is you're actually specifying where those calories come from: protein, fats, and carbs. Now, in order to figure out what is the right amount of protein, fats, and carbs for you to be eating for your body and your goals, the first thing you would want to do is a test week of tracking. You want to track in an app like MyFitnessPal, and you just want to track everything that you do eat. And then from there, you're going to find an average, and then you're going to be able to set and change your macros from there over time. Now, I'm not going to get too much into that in this video. I've made lots of others. You can go check it out if you want to know more about the specifics of actually calculating those numbers. In today's video, though, because I spend so many videos where I really talk about macros and eating more, etc., but I wanted to talk more about the actual foods to eat and what those meals look like. And I'm also just going to walk you through what my day of eating looks like currently, about 3 months into my cut. Okay, to get started properly tracking macros, there's a few things you're going to want to do. Number one, get yourself a digital kitchen scale like this. They're literally $10 on Amazon. This is the Amazon Basics. I've used it for years. Now, the reason you want to scale is because it is so much better to track your food by weight than it is by volume. So using things like cups and tablespoons. For example, how are you going to measure meat using 1 cup? It's way better to actually weigh it out and track it that way. Now, do you have to track every single day for the rest of your life? No, but generally speaking, you want to be pretty consistent with this. And again, this is if we're talking that you are not happy with your physique right now, you want to lose fat, you want to get more toned, aka build more muscle, then this is where you want to get more dialed in, because how you eat is definitely going to create the biggest results there. So once you get to a point that you're happy with your physique, you'll definitely be able to be more intuitive. You won't necessarily have to track if you don't want to, but people who just jump to intuitive eating without taking the time to educate themselves with the things I'm going to talk about in today's video, this is really how you end up getting nowhere. So taking a period of time to really learn what you should eat and what that looks like in terms of quantity, measuring it, tracking it, that's really going to set you up for a lifetime of being fit. Okay, so what are the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to tracking macros macros and just in general how they eat that makes them end up having more body fat than they want and less muscle than they want to have. Generally speaking, people are eating way too much fat, so way too much dietary fat, and they're eating too little protein. Carbs is a little bit up and down. Some people eat enough carbs, but I'd actually say a lot of women do not eat enough carbs. But the thing is, you really need to be eating enough carbs in conjunction with eating enough protein and then not overeating your fat. So the biggest things you're usually going to come up against is undereating the protein, overeating the fat, and most likely with that is undereating the carbs as well. So the way to combat this, I find the easiest way to think about this is to really create meals that are primarily focused on protein and carbs. So what you want to think first with your meal is, okay, what is the protein source and what is the carb source? Really think of that first. And then what you're going to do is build it out from there. So next you would add in maybe a fruit or vegetable. And I know fruits and vegetables are technically carbs, but they're more so called fibrous carbs as opposed to the more starchy complex carbs. So things like rice, quinoa, beans, potatoes, bread, pasta, that kind of stuff. So think complex carb, think protein, and then you can add in fruit or vegetable. Now you don't have to do this, but it's ideal that you do this more so that you're getting your vitamins, your minerals, and nutrients in your body. And then once you have that, you want to think, okay, I'm just going to add in a little bit of fat from food. So things like oil, butter, egg yolks, cheese, avocado, hummus, nut butters, that kind of stuff. Now where people go really wrong is they tend to just have way too much fat because fat is delicious. And in this day and age, we want to have things that are really highly palatable. And the problem is 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, whereas 1 gram of carbs and protein is 4 calories. So a little bit of fat goes a really long way. And when you eat too much fat, you're going to end up eating way too many calories. And that's why a lot of the time you end up feeling like really full and bloated after eating a really fatty, delicious meal. So the easiest way to combat this, I found, is to think first, okay, what is my staple protein? What is my staple carb? Okay, now I'm gonna add in a fruit or veggie. Again, it's optional, but you should. And then I'm going to sprinkle in some fats for flavor. So I'm gonna share an example of what this would look like for what I'm going to have for dinner and also what I have for my lunch. So dinner, I'm gonna have chicken breast as my primary protein source. I know it's not very exciting, but we're gonna make it taste good by the time we add in the other stuff. So I'm gonna be doing 120 grams of raw chicken breast, cut that up, and then I'm going to cook it in just a little bit of olive oil. So I am cutting right now. That means I don't have a lot of fat to use. So I'm really only gonna be using about 2 or 3 grams of olive oil. That is not that much, but it's still enough to give my food flavor, but I'm not just free pouring the oil. If you do that, you can be really sure you're gonna end up eating too much oil. Then I add in some broccoli. So that is the fibrous carb, aka veggie, that I'm adding into the meal. And then the carb I'm gonna have with it is some cooked brown basmati rice. So the main things I was thinking about in this meal was protein, carb source, okay, add in a veggie, add in a tiny bit of fat, and then to top it off, I'm going to use a condiment. So condiments is kind of what I consider the 5th category. It's not a macro, but it's a way to add flavor to your meals without relying just on things like fat, like things like butter and olive oil and all that stuff. So I'm going to use this chutney sauce, which is something that's quite common here in South Africa. It tastes so good and a little bit goes a long way and it ends up giving my dish a lot of flavor. So this is personally how I like to make dinners a lot of the time, is this kind of model of protein, whatever vegetable I want, whatever starchy carb. Usually for me, I'm gonna do rice or potatoes, add in a tiny bit of olive oil for the fat, and then add a condiment on top, like a store-bought sauce, like this chutney, to finish the meal. Now, a different example of this is what I had for lunch and what I have almost every single day, which is my protein oatmeal, or my proats as I call it. So I put this in a Tupperware because I took it out with me for the day to go do some work. But in this meal, again, when I'm thinking, okay, what is the carb? And what is the protein? The carb was oatmeal and the protein was my vegan protein powder. I'm off dairy. That is why I'm having vegan protein, just because I sometimes break out. So I'm trying to avoid dairy for that reason. Then I added in my oat milk, which is mostly a carb. There's a little bit of fat and protein in it too. And then a lot of the time I would add in fruit here, but I didn't today. I usually maybe add in just some berries. And then this is where I also added in a little extra protein from collagen. So I started using collagen, just as an aging thing, but also because it's really good for you and it does help me to get in a little bit more protein. And then what I did was added in a little bit of almond butter. Now, a lot of the times I don't even add in any almond butter for this meal, but I actually did have a little bit of room in my fats for the day. So that's why I added in a little bit, and I was able to think, okay, how can I add in some more fats to my meal? And boom, adding a little nut butter is the way to go. So one of the best ways to ensure that you're going to hit your macros and ensure that you're eating the right amount of food for your body and your goals is to pre-line pre-log your day of eating. So what this means is you're going to decide ahead of time, okay, this is what I'm having, breakfast, lunch, dinner, any snacks, any beverages, any extra little things, right? Then what you do is you simply are going to go into your diary and toggle the amounts of each ingredient until you are hitting your macros. So you want to be within 5 grams plus or minus of each macro. So for example, if your carb target is 200 grams a day, but you're eating 220 grams of carbs, that means you did not hit your macros. I see this a lot with people who say like, oh, this is my target, but they're not actually hitting that target. So the best way to ensure that you do hit your macros as close to on the dot as possible is doing what I'm saying here, is to pre-log. Essentially what you're doing when you're pre-logging is you're creating a little meal plan for yourself for the day. And then that way, all you need to do is eat according to the meal plan. And if you're somebody who doesn't really get bored with your meals, you can honestly just eat the same thing pretty much every single day. And then that way you're hitting your macros. You don't even have to think about it. It's quick and easy. Now, if you don't want to always eat the same thing every day, what you can do instead is just swap out some of the ingredients. So for example, for the dinner, instead of having chicken, maybe you're gonna have steak instead. Or instead of doing oatmeal, maybe you turn it into oat pancakes. Little things like this, just to keep it a little bit more interesting, but to keep the kind of quantities of ingredients similar so you are hitting your macros. Now, if the idea of doing all of this on your own feels quite overwhelming to you and you feel like you need to get some support, get a more custom strategy, get some more accountability and guidance, that's exactly why we have an online one-to-one nutrition and coaching program where we help women shed body fat, build sexy muscle definition, speed up their metabolism, and do all of this in the most enjoyable, sustainable way possible so they still get to live a realistic, enjoyable lifestyle while also achieving their fitness goals. So we've helped tons of women. We've literally worked with over 500 women all over the world, all of different ages and backgrounds. So if you would like to have a fully custom strategy, have your hand held through the entire journey to finally achieve your dream results, then click on the link in the description, fill out an application. We would love to chat with you and see if you'd be a good fit. Okay, so what I wanted to do now was just go over kind of my top hacks for each of the different food categories. And again, what I see is the most common struggles women usually have and what my recommendations are to get over those struggles. Okay, so first, let's talk about protein. Like I said, this is generally going to be one of the areas that a lot of women struggle with, is eating enough protein. And really, most women should be eating, I'd say, somewhere between 130 to 150 grams of protein per day. I don't really think you need to eat much more than that, maybe maximum 160 grams a day, but really just eating an obscene amount of protein is not the answer. You really don't need to have too much, but definitely even getting to 130, 150 grams a day, a lot of women will struggle with. If you are vegan or vegetarian, I'd say it's okay to eat more like 100 and 120 grams of protein a day. Or let's say you even are a meat eater, but you struggle really hard to get to the higher amount. You can stay at this amount to start, but I would encourage you to try to get a little bit higher than this over time because it's just going to help you to build more muscle and lose more body fat. So usually a typical person who is not actively trying to eat enough protein is usually only going to be eating something maybe like 50, 60 grams of protein a day. So they need to double, if not triple that amount of protein to really be hitting their targets. So what is the number one way that you can get in enough protein? Well, honestly, it's just eating more meat. I know that that is not maybe something that everybody wants to hear, but honestly, animal protein is the best quality protein source you can have. And it's just a way that you can get in a lot of protein in one sitting without getting a whole bunch of fat and carbs. So some of the top hacks I found to personally help me get a lot more protein in my diet is number one, to eat some meat with my breakfast. So what I have for breakfast, I'll show you here, is I always have 3 eggs and then I usually do 100 grams of steak. I cut that up raw into the pan and then I cook that again with just about 2 to 3 grams of olive oil. And then a lot of the time I would also add a vegetable like mushrooms or onions or something like that, but I just didn't have any today. And then again, add the condiment, which in this case is ketchup. Now, obviously you don't have to do that. You can also do hot sauce. You can do whatever you want. You just want to track it in your macros. And honestly, guys, I love this meal, the steak and eggs. I actually really look forward to. It's super easy, super simple to make, but it's so good for you. It's going to keep you full and energized for a long time. And again, starting off my day with that solid serving of meat really helps me to make sure I'm going to get enough protein throughout the day. Now, another thing you can do in addition to having just whole eggs is you can always sneak in a bit of egg whites. That's an easy way as well to get literally just liquid protein into your diet without any fats and carbs. However, obviously egg whites is not the most exciting thing to eat, so I wouldn't count on that as too much of a protein source, but it is a little hack that you can do. And then I would of course say make sure that you're eating at least one more meat either in your lunch or your dinner. For me personally, it's pretty much always dinner. I pretty much always do either chicken, beef, or steak, but you can do fish, you can do whatever you want. And if you do want to be more plant-based, you can also do tofu, tempeh, or seitan. beta-glucan to help you hit those goals. Now, another little hack I have is I usually snack on this, which is something that I'm going to have for my snack today. This is biltong. This is something that is specific to South Africa and it's everywhere here, and I'm absolutely obsessed. I really wish they had it in the rest of the world as much because it is so good. But essentially it is beef jerky, more or less. So sometimes just having a little protein snack like that and getting in, you know, maybe 20 grams of protein via something like jerky, or it could be something like a protein bar. That is another way to help get your protein numbers up throughout the day. Now, like I said, I'm not eating dairy right now, but if you are okay to eat dairy, definitely a really easy snack, or can even be an actual meal, is either non-fat Greek yogurt and having that with some fruit, maybe with some nut butter or protein powder as like a parfait, or you can also add it into a smoothie, or also low-fat cottage cheese. This is something I used to have a lot of. I used to have it first thing in the morning on some bread, or sometimes I would add it into a smoothie. So if you can have dairy, those are some good options to also help you hit your protein throughout the day. Now, of course, using a protein powder is totally fine. Ideally, you do just want to get one that is clean, organic, and has really minimally processed ingredients, so you're not just eating a bunch of junk. But having 1 scoop of protein powder a day is completely fine. Maybe maximum 2 scoops. I wouldn't go beyond that though, because you do still want to make sure that you're eating real whole food protein, and honestly nothing will ever compare to just eating actual meat. It is definitely the best quality protein source that you can have. Now, my final protein hacks, sometimes I do this, is I have a little bit of bone broth. So I just kind of maybe have it with some hot water at the end of the day. And again, this is just pure protein, and it really is also collagen. It's super good for you. So if you're just kind of struggling with maybe the last few grams of protein for the day, you can do that. And then, like I said, recently I started adding collagen into my oats every day. So I have about a tablespoon of this, and that's around 10 grams of protein right there. And then this is just like really good for aging and all of that. Okay, now on to the next macro, which is carbs. Now, amazingly enough, a lot of women will usually struggle to eat enough carbs, especially to have like just a carb source and not be going over again on fats, or to be maybe going too far over on protein. So what can you eat that is just a carb? Well, one of the favorite things I love to eat is fruit. I eat lots of fruit because fruit is obviously not only good for you, full of tons of nutrients and fiber, but it's also literally just a carb. Maybe you'll get like 1 or 2 grams of protein, but there's no fat and there's not tons of protein. It's just carbs. So if you're ever struggling to eat enough carbs, which again, this does happen when women start to track their macros properly, is they struggle to be like, what can I eat that's just a carb? Fruit is a good way to go. You're gonna see that this morning, the very first thing I ate was a banana with a little bit of almond butter. So yes, that was a bit of my fat, but I just really enjoy having that combination. You see it a lot in my videos. And then I also had some pineapple and some blackberry. So literally just some carbs, some fiber to start me off with the day. And then also later in the day when I had my snack, which was the biltong, I also had some more pineapple with that. Now, the other kind of big sources of getting in lots of carbs throughout your day is things like oatmeal. Again, so quick and easy to make and a really good solid carb source. You're always gonna see bodybuilders eating oats because it's just a really good way to hit your carb target. Then of course you have things like potatoes, rice, quinoa, which again, that's usually what I would have as the carb source in your dinner. And then the other option is things more like bread and pasta. Now, if you're bulking, you're really trying to really carb up because you're trying to gain a lot of muscle, I find eating bread and pasta is a really good thing to do because they are a more dense source of carbs. So it's going to help you to hit your target more easily. Now, again, bread and pasta, I personally like to really eat as clean as possible. So try to find good quality sources of this. Don't just eat like the really processed kind, ideally. Now, when you're cutting, as I am right now, it's not that bread and pasta is bad for you, but the problem is it is a more dense source of carbs. So you're probably gonna struggle to fit it into the amount of carbs you have for the day and not end up being hungry afterwards. So when you're cutting, you need to think a little bit more high volume and lower carb. So that's why I would suggest sticking more with oatmeal, rice, potatoes when you are cutting. Now, the last thing is you can also drink your carbs. And again, I would say that this is just if you're really struggling to get enough, and probably this is going to apply if you're bulking just because your carb intake has to be so high. So you can have things like Gatorade, coconut water, which is also good when you're training and sweating a lot. It's going to replenish your electrolytes. And you can even have things like orange juice. Now, I also drink a kombucha every single day. I absolutely love it. And that's 13 grams of carbs. So I make sure to track that. So that's another hack for you if you're struggling to get enough carbs. But generally speaking, you obviously want to make sure you're also eating plenty of whole food carbs and not just drinking all your carbs. Now, speaking of drinking, guys, I wanted to say, by the way, make sure to account for anything that you do drink that has carbs, fats, or protein in it. Generally speaking, this is going to be whatever you have with your coffee or tea. You do not have to track the actual coffee or tea because black coffee, black tea is literally 0 calories. But if you put any cream, any milk, any sugar, anything like that into the coffee or tea, you have to be tracking that. So throughout the day today, I had 3 different coffees. 2 of them were decaf because I'm mostly having decaf coffees these days. And then I add in a little bit of brown sugar. So I account for the oat milk and the brown sugar. So again, when you're pre-logging for your day, when you're thinking about what you're gonna have, don't forget about what you're having with coffee, tea, or any other beverages throughout the day. Obviously, if it's a 0 calorie beverage like Coke Zero or something like that, you don't have to track that. Okay, and then moving on to the final category, which is fats. Like I said, the best thing to do to not overeat fat, because that's something that is going to happen really commonly for a lot of women, especially if you are cutting and having to keep your fats a little bit on the lower side. The easiest way to not overeat your fat is to kind of think of using it very sparingly throughout your meals. So if you're cooking your food in a little bit of butter or a little bit of oil, only use a little bit. It's always best to start off with less, and then if you end up looking at your macros and realizing like, oh, I actually can fit in a little bit more fat, then you can increase it, but better to do it that way than the inverse where you can't take it out later. So if you're adding butter onto toast or peanut butter or anything like that, really try to use a bit of a smaller amount to make sure that you're not overdoing it. And then the other area I'd say where a lot of people end up having too much fat is maybe they're having too fatty of a source of protein. So when you are getting your meats, when you're getting your protein, try to stick to leaner cuts. Like it doesn't have to be super lean. For example, you can still have something like chicken thighs, which does have a bit more fat than chicken breast, for example, but it's not that high fat. What I personally find to be really high fat is ground beef. Usually if you get like the 80-20, I just think it's actually way too fatty and way too heavy. I don't even enjoy it. And I personally think if you go for extra lean ground beef, it's still fatty enough, but it's not going to be too high fat. Or if you're having like a steak, make sure to go for a leaner cut of steak because depending on the cut, it can be really high fat. Now you can factor this into your macros for the day if you do prefer to have a fattier meat. Even something like salmon, for example, can really add up. So again, this is the whole game with macros is you can technically have whatever you want. It's really just about making it fit into the numbers for the day. But I personally think so that you don't end up in a position where you accidentally go over on your fat, it's usually best to stick with slightly leaner meat. And I think most people are going to prefer to spend their fats on things like butter, oil, peanut butter, that kind of stuff, rather than just like a really fatty meat. All right, fam. So that is everything you need to know about what to eat, how much, and what are the actual foods that you should be eating to look and feel your best, to lose body fat, build that sexy muscle definition, get a really beautiful snatched hourglass body, and be able to easily maintain it year-round for life with ease. So like I said, if you don't want to figure this all out on your own, if you want to be told exactly what macros you should be having, what to eat, when and how to change the amount depending on what your goals are, and how to do the best possible workouts to achieve your dream results, that's exactly what we offer for you inside of one-to-one coaching, where we guide you through everything, a fully customized strategy, and hold you accountable and encourage you the whole way through to finally build your dream physique. So if you would like to be guided by us, click on the link in the description. We would love to chat with you and see if you're a good fit. All right, fam, thanks so much for checking out this video. And then next, I want you to go watch this one here, where I'm going to break down more about the amounts of macros and how to calculate what your custom macros should be. So I'll see you in that video.